I had learned to do this really good whistle after I adopted a dog off of Trash and Treasure. My friend taught me to take 2 fingers from each hand, put them in the corner of my mouth, fold the tongue over, and then close your mouth just right to let out a really loud whistle that even a dog like mine could not ignore.
Welcome back to another episode of The Fine Line. I'm Matt Hansen. There are some stories that just need to get told. You know, the kind that get shared on chairlifts, around a campfire, or while you're sitting on the tailgate with friends after a big day in the mountains. These are the stories we tell our closest friends and family members because they end up being part of who we are. And for that reason, they stand the test of time. This is one of those stories. It means we're taking a trip back to a time before cell phones were ubiquitous, and when most callouts for Teton County Search and Rescue required good old-fashioned boots on the ground. It's a bit of a departure from how we normally do things on the Fine Line, but I think you're going to like it. And if you do, let us know, and we'll make sure to bring you more of them. If there's one thing that Search and Rescue has, it's a lot of stories. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll hear from Carol Viau, one of the most tenured volunteers with Teton County Search and Rescue.
The Fine Line is presented by Stio. And hey, that's where I happen to work. My name is Madison Gilmore. I am on Stio's People and Culture team. Our primary goal is to cultivate an exceptional experience for our almost 200 employees at every stage of their journey with the brand, whether they're based here in the Tetons, in Portland, Oregon, Portland, Maine, or somewhere in between. From providing best-in-class benefits for our team members, their families, and their dogs, to designing inclusive and supportive policies like flexible time off, or launching initiatives like Mountain Mondays to prioritize camaraderie and play. Balance and fulfillment are central to the culture at Stio. I've been with Stio since the first catalog dropped back in 2012 because Stio's ethos and product empower me to weave these values seamlessly into my everyday life. Want to learn more? You can find us at stio.com. Thanks for listening, and let the outside in.
My name is Carol Viau. I've been a member of Teton County Search and Rescue since 2000. When I started with the team, we initially weren't allowed to go on rescues due to the fact that we were getting caught up to speed with training. I didn't initially move to Jackson to be in search and rescue, and I'm not sure anyone does or has that specific plan. I went to high school not too far away in Utah, and through our job board at my high school, I got a summer job working at Jackson Lake Lodge in Grand Teton National Park. I didn't have a car at the time, so my folks drove me up and dropped me off the day after I graduated high school. I worked as a housekeeper, the type of job that builds character because people completely ignore you and you may as well be invisible. But I learned how to appreciate the work of the underappreciated, and I had a lot of nice coworkers. I loved being in the park, but I did wish I had a car to get to trailheads to go hiking. I ended this summer by going to the University of Utah and didn't return to Jackson until I ran out of money for school. So I started working in Jackson Hole in the winters as a ski instructor. I spent my summers working in Alaska on fishing boats. And in the spring and fall, I was going to school, as my university was on quarters at the time. I started to kind of settle in Jackson, but then left for a winter to ski in Chamonix and returned to Alaska to work for a heli ski company. By the time I returned to Jackson again, this was probably late 90s, I was kind of lonely and I wanted to settle down and hang out with friends that I'd lost touch with. One day I saw an ad in the paper that Jackson Hole Fire EMS was looking for volunteer ambulance drivers. I had gotten my EMT, emergency medical technician, before I left for Chamonix. The reason I got my EMT to start with was because when I was working on fishing boats in Alaska, I was seeing a lot of stuff, and I was starting to stitch people up with like a needle and thread that I brought for sewing buttons. So that's why I got my EMT, because I felt like I was seeing things and doing things that I was not qualified for. So I applied, and that got me into that first responder world. And then in 2000, I joined TCSAR as a volunteer, and I was 31 at the time. My first year, on October 26th, I finally got the green light to attend a rescue. We had received a page for an injured person down by Willow Creek, which is an area south of Hoback Canyon, south of Jackson. Due to the time of year in that location, we figured it was probably a hunter, but all we knew is someone was injured. It was dark, cold, and raining. We drove down to the Willow Creek trailhead, formulated a plan, and split into search groups and started hiking up a ridge. I can't remember everyone who was in my search team, but I definitely remember Glenn Messersmith, who has retired from the team a while ago. One thing I remember about that night is that I was the youngest volunteer in my search group. As we were hiking up, I remember thinking, how are we going to find this guy in the dark? At the top of the ridge, I asked the guys around me if I should try to just give a whistle, because I knew I had a really good whistle. All the guys looked at me like I was an idiot, and none of them really believed that my whistle would have any effect. So I decided I was just going to try it. There's no harm in trying, even though they might think I was an idiot because it was my first rescue. I had learned to do this really good whistle after I adopted a dog off of Trash and Treasure. My friend taught me to take 2 fingers from each hand, put them in the corner of my mouth, fold the tongue over, and then close your mouth just right to let out a really loud whistle that even a dog like mine could not ignore. So I walked over the edge of the ridge, I took a deep breath, and let out the loudest whistle I could. 2 seconds later, we hear a shotgun blast. Bam! And I said, hey guys, I think they're over here.
We'll be right back after this short break. You're listening to The Fine Line from Backcountry Zero.
Hi, I'm Max Schaefer, brewmaster for Roadhouse Brewing Company. As an avid outdoorsman, someone who previously guided, and a certified first responder, I know the importance of being responsible and safe when having fun in the backcountry. One of my favorite things to do when I come out of the backcountry is to swing by our brew pub, Roadhouse Pub and Eatery on the town square in downtown Jackson, Wyoming, to share stories and snacks and to raise a glass to a fun, memorable, and safe trip. All of us at Roadhouse Brewing Company are excited to bring you this episode of The Fine Line and remind you to stay safe out there and to never be late to happy hour. Find us on the town square, at our tasting room on Gregory Lane, or in a cans at a store near you. Learn more at roadhousebrewery.com.
We walked a little further off the ridge towards where I had been whistling, and way down below in the valley, we could see a small fire. The guys I was with were as surprised as I was that we'd found them in less than an hour. So we start walking down this steep slope, scrambling over bushes, down trees, rocks, clumps of sagebrush. And as we get closer to the fire, I started to see some horses and a large man sitting down near the fire. I stepped up close towards the flames, and through the light of the fire, I could see something hanging off of one of the horses. I couldn't quite wrap my head around it because it seemed large and bulky. And then I realized it looked like 2 legs were hanging off of the saddle. My heart was racing and I didn't know what to think. I was really confused until I got to the patient and saw that he had no legs. He was a double amputee. Those were his legs hanging off the saddle. I realized right away the guide had built the fire too close to the patient. So I put myself between the patient and the fire burnt a hole in my shirt from sparks flying off. I still have that shirt. It's just a small hole. And I kneeled down to talk to the guy and found him to be super nice and calm despite his situation. I don't recall exactly if his horse slipped in the mud or if he got bucked off, but somehow he'd gotten thrown off the horse. When his hunting guide tried to help him up, he said his back hurt, and since his legs had become dislodged in the fall, they decided to just take them off. I assume he was straddling the horse when this happened. To get him out of there, we called for other teammates to bring us a wheeled litter, which is an aluminum backboard mounted onto a mountain bike type tire. Ideally, you can transport the wheeled litter down a trail, but we were not close to a trail. This man was pretty big even without legs, and when we put him in the litter, we still had to lift the litter over rocks and down trees. And of course, it's raining, so there's a lot of mud. It turned out to be a pretty long carry, up and over down trees for quite a while. We were slipping and sliding in the mud with folks on all sides of the litter hanging on and trying to hold it up, doing our best not to let it tip over or drop it. As we were walking down the mountain with just our headlamps to light the way, I'm trying to talk to this guy. His arms were hanging over the side of the litter, so I tried to put some padding under them to keep them from going numb from the pressure of the rails under his arms. As a medical provider, part of my responsibility is to ask specific questions to check in on the patient. These questions can be such as, do you know where you are? Do you know what happened? Do you take any medications? What's your pain level on a scale of 1 to 10? At that question, he told me his pain level, which I don't recall, and as a reflex, I said the follow-up question, which is, what's the worst pain you've ever felt? And he looked up at me and he said, that time I lost my legs? I was so embarrassed I asked that. He proceeded to tell me how he was from the Midwest and he had been in a grain elevator one day and he was walking across a catwalk that was supposed to be closed and the trapdoor opened and he fell in. The only way to get him out of there was to have his legs removed. That told me that he had a very high pain tolerance, but I really regretted asking how I said that. He was very nice. He told me that hunting was one of the few activities he could still do without his legs. We were able to get him out of the backcountry and to an ambulance at 2 or 3 in the morning, and I had to be at work at 7. I'm not a coffee drinker, but I remember thinking that if I were, this would have been a good time to start. And I was really wishing for some hot chocolate because I had a hard time staying awake while driving home. After being out all night, I was covered in mud and I couldn't sleep when I got home. And I remember thinking, wow, this is a different kind of exhaustive, elated experience than I'd had before. And I'd had different versions of those at times. I was fired up to do it again after getting caught up on sleep. But that took more than a day since I had to go pretty much straight to work after. You forget about the recovery time that rescuers might need. Unfortunately, I don't remember his name, and I don't know how he's doing today. I did hear from someone that he had had back surgery at the Mayo Clinic, and he was back hunting in this area 2 years later. I would have liked to stay in touch.
Thank you for listening to The Fine Line. That was Teton County Search and Rescue volunteer Carol Viau. Though it took a few years, the hangar is now fully stocked with hot cocoa right next to the coffee. Carol's story was recorded in the studios of KHOL 89.1 FM. For more stories about Jackson Hole, make sure you subscribe to Jackson Unpacked, a weekly news podcast produced right here at KHOL. Our editing is by Melinda Binks. The theme song is by Ann and Pete Sibley, and this wonderful track you're listening to right now is by Ben Winship. The original cover art is by Jen Reddy, and my name is Matt Hansen. The Fine Line is produced by Backcountry Zero, a project of the Teton County Search and Rescue Foundation to elevate the importance of preventative search and rescue. We'll be back in your feed with a new episode in a couple weeks. Learn more at backcountryzero.com.